911 operator Harris, where is your emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
Okay, where are you located?
I'm at 3003 Springfield Drive, apartment 4.
3003 Springfield Drive, apartment number 4?
Yes. Oh my God.
Okay, how old is your girlfriend?
She's like 26. Bring it. Oh my
You said 26. Where was she shot at?
I don't know. She's on the grill right now. I don't know.
Friday, March the 13th, they went into her home for a warrant or something or another, did not announce themselves, scared the crap out of her and her boyfriend, who apparently let off a shot, and then they proceeded to shoot 20-something times into the home and shot her 8 times.
As soon as the shot hit, I could feel the heat in my leg. And so I just returned fire. I got 4 rounds off. Face on, about probably 20 feet away, right down the hallway. There's a bedroom door on the right, and there's the male and a female.
Walk straight back or I'll send this dog on you! Walk back to my voice! Walk back or I'll send this dog! Walk back to me! Keep on walking! Walk down! Walk! Walk back to me! Watch out! Walk back to me now! Now! Hallway, go around. Door open, door open.
Is that glass open or we need to it's broken? Hang on, we got the door open. Hey, front door, front door. Front door's open.
I got it. Hey, we're taking it, she's down.
Squeeze up. Oh, watch out. Watch that.
I got her.
You're right.
I got her. I'm stepping over in front of you, dude.
Hey, watch the kitchen. Watch the kitchen. I got the kitchen clear. Alright.
Check her. We gotta check her. Check her, make sure she's good.
Hey, lift the bed up. I'm gonna go this way. Alright.
Yeah, go ahead and give me a minute in here.
Clear.
Joe. There you go, buddy. Ma'am, can you hear us? Louisville Metro Police Department.
Check that wrist, dude. Check the wrist.
Medic up.
Let's see if we can get some lights on for him.
Yep.
There's a hallway light. See if that
Hey.
comes on. Watch out for this casing right here.
There's also slug and casings in here.
Stop on here. Huh?
Casing there. Slug there. Casings here.
What is it? What's this address? Yes. Yeah.
Hey, don't turn your cameras off.
What's the address here?
Hey.
3003 Springfield, apartment 3.
Hey. Apartment 4 is now a crime scene. Let's go ahead and move out. All right. She's done.
We'll keep one person here on her. She's done. Scene secure. She's 1080. We're leaving a couple people in here to hold the scene. It's secure for detectives to come up.
Guys in the back. Guys in the back saying they saw a white vehicle.
Jamarcus Glover, arrive at Taylor's apartment, go inside, and then come back out with a package. Police say Glover then got into his car and drove to the Muhammad Ali address, which the detective called a known drug house. The warrant goes on to say that a U.S. postal inspector verified that Glover had been receiving packages at Taylor's apartment, and that it is not uncommon for drug traffickers to receive mail packages at different locations to avoid detection from law enforcement. Detectives also wrote they believe Glover may be keeping narcotics or proceeds from the sale of narcotics inside Taylor's apartment for safekeeping.
He also called the police because he did not know that these were police officers coming into the home. There's no knock there. They can come there, bust down the door, and just come in. They hit the door with a battering ram.
It's a loud bang at the door. She pops up out of her sleep and scared her to death. Me too. Like, who is that? The door, comes, off the hinges. So I just let off one shot. I still can't see who it is or anything.
Several times, Breonna and Kenny both were screaming, "Who is it? Who's at the door?" They never announced themselves. But when they first released their story, they said that they announced themselves.
I knocked on the door, banged on it. We didn't announce the first couple because our intent was not to hit the door. Our intent was to give her plenty of time to come to the door because they said she was probably there alone.
Kenny, several neighbors, no one heard them announce themselves. There's not a hallway. Each person has their own door, but it's a very small square there that you go in. There's 8 apartments in each building. So yeah, you absolutely will hear somebody out there. Any of the neighbors will tell you she's pretty quiet. They never really ever heard her. They saw her coming and going to work or coming and going with my other daughter, which is her little sister. They never really made a lot of noise. So to hear all of this stuff going on would alarm people.
Judge Mary Shaw signs off on 5 warrants as part of a large narcotics investigation. 3 warrants were for properties on Elliott Avenue in West Louisville. Detectives wrote they were looking for drugs, weapons, electronics, and mail related to illegal drug activity. A 4th warrant was for a house on Muhammad Ali. And then this warrant for 26-year-old Breonna Taylor's South Louisville apartment. How was Taylor connected? She wasn't the main suspect in the case, but she was named on the warrant. On the night of March 12th, Detective John Mattingly and several others were briefed on the plan. Mattingly says he drove by Taylor's apartment around 11:45 to scope it out. And then, around 12:30 on the morning of March 13th, officers parked in front of Breonna Taylor's building and walked up to her door.
When SWAT was doing their thing down at 24 in Madison, we went over Elliott, whatever it was. We executed ours at the same time.
About 10 miles away, officers executed a warrant at a different property on Elliott Avenue. There, police found their main suspect, Glover, and arrested him. Around 12:40, officers began to bang on Taylor's door, setting into motion the events that eventually led to her death.
Wait a minute. It's a loud knock at the door.
The detectives say they knocked on the door multiple times. Walker says they jumped out of bed, started getting dressed, and he grabbed his gun. But Detective Mattingly says he saw them. Walker says shots started flying. He fell to the ground and dropped his gun. Mattingly was shot. The detective says he fired 2 more rounds and then told other officers he'd been shot. It was called over the radio at 12:43 a.m., according to a CAD report provided by the mayor. Detective Miles Cosgrove fired shots from inside the apartment. Brett Hankinson blindly fired 10 rounds from outside through a patio door, according to his termination letter.
They're just shooting, like we're both on the ground, and when all the shots stop, I'm like panicking. She's right there on the ground, like bleeding.
Records show 3 neighbors called 911 at 12:42, reporting shots near their apartment.
I was home in bed. Kenny called me and said that somebody kicked in the door and he thinks Breonna is shot. And I'm like, what do you mean you think she's shot? Where is she? He said he couldn't see. He was yelling her name and like screaming for her.
I'm still yelling help because she's over here like coughing and like, I'm just freaking out. But I'm on the phone with her mom now at this point. So they keep yelling, come out. So I'm like, okay, it's the police.
We get disconnected. I drop the phone and whatnot. So I get dressed and I head over there. But in the middle of me heading over there, I'm calling Kenny's phone. He's not answering. So I'm calling Breonna's phone and she's not answering. And so when I get to her street, it's lined with police. There's an officer at the end of the road who I tell that I need to get through there, something's going on with my daughter. She tells me that I needed to get to the hospital, that 2 ambulances had been through. One took an officer and the other took the girl, whoever was hurt. And when I get to the hospital, I'll tell them why they're there. So they check. She comes back and said, well, she's not here. And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe I got here before her. And so I sat there for about 2 hours, and the lady comes out and says, well, ma'am, there's no recollection of this person even being on the way. So I knew that I needed to get back to the apartment. No one knew what was quite going on. But once I got back, I was able to get through a little more, so I was closer to the apartment. And there were some more officers kind of standing there hanging around. So I told them who I was and that I needed to get into the apartment and see what was going on with my daughter. So they told me to hang tight, that a detective would come over and talk to me. We stood out there about 2 hours before the detective came over. So when he comes over, again, we introductions, who I am, who he is. And so he asked me if I knew of anybody who would want to hurt Breonna or Kenny. At this point, they still hadn't told me who did this and what happened. I asked, where's Kenny? I need to talk to Kenny. And so he told me to hang tight. So he came back about another hour and a half, 2 hours later, and he asked, had Breonna and Kenny been having any problems? And I'm like, no, are you insinuating Kenny did something to Breonna? Because Kenny would never hurt her. So at this point, I'm screaming, where's Kenny? I need to talk to Kenny. He says, well, Kenny's at one of our offices trying to help us piece together what happened here tonight. I asked about the officer being shot. I said, well, they said an officer was shot. He said, well, he was here responding to a call. And I said, a call for what? And he said, well, there were some officers there to serve a narcotics warrant. And I said, for who? Because Breonna and Kenny ain't selling no narcotics. He said he wasn't for sure. He hadn't seen the warrant. And I said, well, I want to see the warrant. And he said that he didn't know where it was, that they hadn't seen it, that it could have gotten lost in the shuffle of things. He tells us to wait again. So it was probably about 11 a.m. when he comes back over and tells us that it'll be a little bit longer, they'll be wrapping up, and that we'll be able to get into the house. And I say, well, why won't you tell me where Breonna is? I need to see Breonna. And he says, well, she's still in the apartment. So when he said she's in the apartment, I knew what that meant at that time. So I said, but I want to see her. I need to see her. I need to know that it's her. And he said, well, we've identified her through paperwork. And I said, well, how do you know it's her? Because there's 2 women that live in that apartment. And he said, are you sure? And I said, Yes, I'm sure, because my other daughter lives in that apartment. But at the time, I knew she wasn't home, but I wanted to see Breonna. He said that I still couldn't see her, that it would be up to the coroner. The coroner finally arrives. It was about 1:30 p.m. when the coroner comes out and says that I wouldn't be allowed to see her and that they've already identified her. Some other people snuck her away in this van while the coroner was talking to us.
This policy change is coming after the explosion of national attention and pushing for justice in the officer-related shooting death of Breonna Taylor during a raid of her South Louisville apartment. Mayor Fisher announcing this afternoon they want to provide that additional level of scrutiny with the requirement that the chief sign off on it first. The police department is also updating its body camera policy to require that all sworn officers, including narcotics officers, have body cameras available for serving warrants and other situations when they will be identifying themselves as police officers. But the mayor and police chief aren't stopping there.
That's why today I'm announcing the following steps. In partnership with the Metro Council, the mayor's office will establish a work group of community, public safety, and criminal justice leaders to explore a process for a strong and independent civilian review of police disciplinary matters.
That work group is the Civilian Review Board that the Interdenominational Ministers Coalition suggested just last week. They were also at this announcement today with the mayor, and they had a lot to say. One of the police detectives in the Taylor shooting is facing more criticism in a separate federal lawsuit in a different case. Tonight, Gabrigagas tells us why the accuser calls the officer, quote, a dirty cop.
Police officer could be charged for shooting bullets through her apartment, but not in her apartment.
Louisville, Kentucky is bracing for riots, including boarding up the windows of the federal courthouse there, ahead of an expected ruling on whether the cops involved in the death of Breonna Taylor will be charged criminally. And judge signed an order to close the city's historic Gene Snyder U.S. Courthouse and Custom House downtown all week. It was in anticipation of an impending announcement over possible charges. U.S. Attorneys Russell Coleman also requested a Homeland Security provide protection for the courthouse and 3 other neighboring federal buildings, as well as being closed and protected. Federal buildings were boarded up and ready for the feared violent backlash if the officers are not charged. Mayor Greg Fisher told the paper that the city has not been altered to a Cameron announcement, but we believe we will get some advance notice. A spokesman of Coleman, the U.S. attorney, would not confirm that the announcement is coming next week. Hakerson, the cop who fired 10 shots, was later fired. Mattingly and Cosgrove remained on administrative assignment. The city last week agreed to a $12 million settlement of a wrongful death lawsuit brought by the family of Taylor, the 26-year-old gunned down by cops during a botched no-knock raid on her home on March 13, 2020.
The grand jury only indicted Officer Brent Hankinson, who was fired from the department this summer, charging him with 3 counts of wanton endangerment for firing shots that ended up in a neighboring apartment with 3 people inside, including a pregnant woman. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison on each count. Detective Miles Cosgrove and Jonathan Mattingly were not charged at all. Police in riot gear making arrests after the long-awaited announcement. No officers charged for causing Breonna Taylor's death.
When the police finished their search of Breonna Taylor's apartment while she lay dying in a hallway, they found no drugs. They didn't find any money either. They didn't find any drug paraphernalia. They didn't even find any loose cigarettes. They found absolutely nothing illegal. So 2 model citizens attacked in their own home by 3 thugs with extensive disciplinary record problems in the police, and the woman is murdered, killed in her own home, and the police find absolutely nothing there. Nothing illegal whatsoever. Not only do they not find any drugs, they don't find any money, they don't find anything that even hints that she's part of some huge drug operation, because that's the whole reason they were there, because she was supposed to be part of this enormous drug operation, and they don't find anything at all. In fact, they don't even find anything illegal. Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker are so freaking squeaky clean, the cops couldn't even invent anything. The only crime that was ever committed in Breonna Taylor's apartment was when the police murdered her. That was the only crime committed in that apartment, the crimes that the police committed. When you read Disinformation Timeline, they never mention that. They never mention that Breonna Taylor had no criminal record. For a woman who was supposed to be this drug-dealing accomplice, she sure led a clean life, now didn't she? They couldn't dirty her up. Media couldn't do their favorite trick, dirtying the black victim up. They don't mention that after the murder, as the protests grew, the corrupt Commonwealth attorney Thomas Wine approached Jamarcus Glover, you know, the alleged drug kingpin. The Commonwealth attorney approached Mr. Glover with an extraordinary plea deal. Thomas Wine offered Jamarcus Glover to have all the charges dropped and give the guy probation. All Jamarcus Glover needed to do was just say that Breonna Taylor was an accomplice in a drug running operation. Thomas Wine didn't require any evidence. Now you see, typically, if you're going to be claiming that other people are accomplices in a drug operation, you got to give proof. You have to offer evidence that can be shown in court, demonstrated in court. Instead, what Thomas Wine said was, look, just say that she was. There's no evidence. You don't have any sort of proof for that. Well, it doesn't matter. If you just say that she was, just say that she was part of it. Jamarcus Glover said no. Now, I want you to think about that. This was the prosecutor who refused to bring charges against the police, but he did try to bring charges against Kenneth Walker. He was going to railroad Kenneth Walker if he could, and he was going to engineer letting go of the allegedly biggest drug dealer in all of the South. Thomas Wine On a dime, he was willing to drop all charges against Jamarcus Glover and let the biggest dope dealer south of the Mason-Dixon line, to hear the prosecutor tell it, you're going to let the El Chapo of the South go with probation if he would just implicate Breonna Taylor. All you gotta do to get the prosecutor to drop the case is say that Breonna Taylor was part of a drug running operation. You don't need to offer evidence. We just need you to say that she was. Shouldn't you have every reporter, every investigative journalist, shouldn't you have every news outlet on the planet looking into this? This is public record. This was not a criminal investigation. This was a criminal cover-up by the state. You should have the State Bar of Kentucky already using Thomas Wine's law degree for toilet paper. And yet nothing's been done against him. He hasn't lost his job. Nobody is saying that he's going to be prosecuted. Nothing has happened.
These officers being fired and arrested. If anybody else would have done it, they'd be arrested. So they obtained a warrant under a lie. They told several stories, and so they should be arrested. I mean, they lied. There was no reason for them to be there. And the person you proclaimed to want was in custody. To go in there at 1 a.m. and scare her and kill her.